Hello, everybody. I'm Maggie Burnett Stogner, Executive Director for the Center for Environmental Filmmaking at American University in Washington, D.C., and it is my great pleasure to be able to interview the filmmakers for a case study, an impact case study for the Jackson Wild 2020 Media Awards. And I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this film. Congratulations so much on The Elephant Queen. It's just an extraordinary film. I have with me today the legendary Vicki Stone and Mark Diebel. So good to see you again. And Etienne Olaf, who is the assistant director and the director of outreach for the film. And I would like to just dive in. I think this was a very powerful film, but please, let's hear from you, Vicki and Mark, about what were your goals for the film? What was the catalyst for making this film?
Well, it's lovely to be here, Maggie. Thank you for that generous introduction. Our aim with the film was to make a feature-length film that would reach the widest possible global audience to inspire the world to fall in love with elephants, but at the same time to make sure that the film made a difference for elephants on the ground in East Africa and particularly in Kenya.
Mark, do you want to add anything to that?
I think Vicki's said it quite succinctly. I think what was different was that with this film we went in knowing that we had the outreach and education would be a very important component of what we were doing. So although the film took us quite a while to make, the outreach and education sort of came along with it in steps all the way through that process. And the nice thing was that being in camp like we are, we're one big family, and we can discuss these things. I mean, at every mealtime we sit down and we can sort of brainstorm these things. And it was a real privilege to be able to have that time and space to work like that.
Just to give you an idea of when we set out to make the film, so we were raising therefore not only the money for the film, but also the money for the outreach campaign. And that was a big commitment, but one that was hugely important to particularly the three of us, but also to the rest of the team who supported us at every level. But it's the idea of running. It was almost like making two films, developing the outreach alongside making the film. When we were in the field, we were very active, trying to provide materials, work with any of the NGOs or organizations working alongside elephants. And then I'm sure later in this conversation, we'll go into everything we developed for the outreach campaign.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, it's so interesting because films, for a long time, the film was made and then kind of after the fact, people thought about, oh, outreach or impact. And to hear you talk about how you were really developing that impact campaign from the outset, from the very inception of the project, is a pretty new model. We were doing some research this summer, supported by HHMI Tango Bank Studios, on kind of new models for impact campaigns and looking at the kind of a holistic approach to creative, collaborative alliances and outreach strategies. And I would love to hear from you, how you organized your thinking around those three areas from the very beginning of the project.
I think the thing that we came to the conclusion when we said, okay, we're filmmakers, we're storytellers, we're experts in natural history. Mark's a zoologist. We've got all. What can we best do to support conservation efforts in Kenya? Or actually, we asked ourselves initially worldwide, and then we said, let's be realistic, where we've really got the connections, where Etienne and his wife, for example, set up an international primary school, which is a leader in its field in that its primary aim is environmental education. So we were, between us all, we had all the wherewithal to make a difference in Kenya particularly. So we decided, why not start small, and if it grows and becomes something that naturally expands into the rest of East Africa and then beyond, that's probably the best way to do it, rather than to be over ambitious and say we can take on sort of doing something for everybody, and actually tailor make it for, so often the places where the films are made get completely ignored. So this allowed us to say, okay, Kenya is our primary goal for this outreach. How do we best tackle that? And it meant developing relationships with organizations like the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, and really going into detail, getting into the fabric of the country, a country in which all of us have lived for the last 20 or 30 years. So we very specifically decided, small is beautiful, and let's let it grow naturally. And that is what's happened, because it just word of mouth works, and it starts to embed in the culture.
So I want you to obviously share a lot of the materials that you put together, but first let's go to Etienne, who's here from Kenya, joining us. And here, I just would like to know a little bit more about this school that you founded and your role as assistant director and outreach director for the Elephant Queen.
Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Well, Vicky, Mark, and I have worked together in various capacities for the last 20, 25 years. And film is where it all started. But through the making of each film, there was always a process. There was always the realization that what we wanted more than anything was for our films to have an impact, an educational impact, an inspirational impact. And Lucy, my wife, also worked with Vicky and Mark, and the ethos, the importance of environmental education, of using film for conservation, for inspiration, coalesced. It was a beautiful amalgamation. The Elephant Queen, in many respects, was the culmination of that, both as a film, but also in the realization that we had it between us to really have an impact, and that developed both by virtue of the honor of being in Tsavo, one of the greatest wildlife refuges in the world, and also the very, very intense human wildlife conflict that's occurring on a daily basis on the outskirts. It was all that with the naissance of Kivukoni, the school, which in a way guided what we decided to do, and the process we followed to give life to the outreach and education program.
And I think one of the things that is indicative is that when we were first looking to say, okay, if we're going to work, we decided education and communication was the area that we should put our efforts into, based on the fact that I think it's 40% of the population in Kenya is under 15. And as time goes on, it's how those people emerge to lead and be citizens of Kenya is absolutely crucial. And but what we didn't know was, we looked at the curriculum and we thought, okay, what can we add to the curriculum? There's nothing to do with the environment or conservation or in the curriculum, but the curriculum is absolutely bulging and the teachers can hardly keep up with what they've got already to do. So we had to find ways of looking at, and I'll go into detail later about how we actually address that. But we also then looked to groups who were working in wildlife and conservation education outside the school system. And Etienne set up through Kivukoni a workshop in, I think it was 2017, where we were still making the film. We showed what we had of the film. We ran a workshop for 3 days where we invited about 50 people from all over Kenya. And what was so amazing is these were all people doing similar things spread around the country, many of whom had never met each other. So we enabled and made, or the school did, and the school became the focus of that because we ran it at the school. And Etienne brought in all these different speakers and people to lead the workshop with the express aim of saying, we want to do this together, and we'd like to know from you guys in the field, what is it that you most need? That if we've got the film as the core piece, what else do you need when you're talking to your communities, your children, and what would be the most helpful? And based on that workshop and what the answers that came back from that, we developed the content of the outreach program. And in the end, we'll be bringing it, about to do it now this September, but COVID's put a stop to it. We were going to run a second workshop, having created all the materials, which shows everybody what they are, how to use them, and sets people up around the country for when the Elephant Queen visits through the Elephant Queen mobile cinema.
Which I want to come back. Oh, go ahead.
I think what really helped is that The Elephant Queen is a timeless film. It's not an issue-driven film, and therefore that really allowed us to look to education. So we're thinking in sort of a time span of 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and really trying to raise awareness and appreciation in the next generation. But because the film is timeless, we thought that gave us the perfect platform to develop all the materials.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, one, you have this amazing alliance building that's going on. I mean, that's extraordinary to bring that many people together and work while you're still making the film to work through what you can do with the film in terms of a educational campaign. But those decisions, those creative decisions, also to make something that's timeless, to make something where you named the characters, the elephant characters in the film. So I would, before we actually go to your website where you can show us a lot of the different materials and different educational outreach that you've done, let's just hear a little bit more, Vicki and Mark, about the creative decisions that went into the film that you knew were going to have impact in a certain way.
The film is very different to other films we've made, not only because it's a feature film, but we really wanted to reach people who don't even know or didn't even know that they cared about or loved animals, who weren't necessarily interested, weren't sort of natural history film fans, but just people who we knew and believed that through a story about elephants, you could talk to a very broad audience. And one of the most regular responses we get when people have seen the film is talking about the elephants. I never realized they're just like us. And that one line to me indicates a switch that's been switched on in somebody that says, suddenly I'm going to treat them differently. I'm going to, in whatever way, however near or far you live from them. But particularly in Kenya, if that is a big switch to turn, because for a lot of people living alongside elephants, they are nothing but frightening, a menace. They're raiding your crops, they're breaking down your house. There are very real issues that you're living with. And yet the other side of being an elephant is never represented, is never known. And that we really wanted the film to be very accessible, but to also not to be absolutely stuffed with natural history so that it blocked the story, but to let the story, which in a feature film is obviously so important, to let the story drive it, but make sure that through the images, the words, there was a build-up of an enormous amount of information, but not necessarily presented it to you as factual information, but just a story where you could laugh. We have fun with it. It's not all serious. And yet,
I love that dung beetle sequence.
Exactly.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I think
That
also
was
we
fun.
wanted to take people on an emotional journey and really make them feel what it means to be part of an elephant family. That whole, that love for family, that decision-making process that is so much the realm of the matriarch, and just give people for an hour and a half to immerse them in the elephant's world and to have them fall in love.
And that's a creative impact that's so significant. I mean, the film really does take us through a whole range of emotions, I mean, tremendous sadness at times, laughter with the dung beetles particularly, joy, empathy. I mean, it really runs the gamut of emotions. And by the end, you are totally connected with this family of elephants.
I think that's partly happening through the creative decisions that we made in terms of how it was filmed. So when we started, our very ambitious and rather sort of lofty idea had been that this film was going to be a mixture of March of the Penguins, The Lion King, and Shrek. Which I'll explain. March of the Penguins, because it was so successful in the genre, and such a beautifully told story, with the way Morgan Freeman told the story, especially at the beginning of the film. You're just completely drawn in to a story. The Lion King, because it's that whole circle of life and that very uplifting feeling. It's emotional in all sorts of different ways, and yet this, you know, that's animation and this is real. And then Shrek, because of some of the moments in it where you go, really, ugh. And you'll know what I'm thinking of.
Think about the bullfrog, eating the bullfrogs. I mean, that was exactly that.
But then we also Mark shot it so that whenever we're with the little guys, you're right in there at their eye level or below. So you give them as much presence, and almost make them like animated characters. And you're often looking up at the elephants, but you know, you're not always just at elephant height. So we were playing around with a lot of different, or with actually, well, we identified a style of filming, an angle of filming that we wanted to, which I think has also an emotional impact when you're watching the film.
Yeah, it's very immersive. I mean, you really feel like you're right there. And I love your description of really getting in at the eye level of the baby elephants. I mean, that was extraordinarily effective in helping audiences, I think, connect with them, and not just through the eyes of the adult elephants. You know, it was very immersive. I'm really impressed.
Yes.
One more question for Etienne, and then let's go to the website where you can take us to. Etienne, so as assistant director, I'd like to hear from you, you know, how you participated in some of these creative decisions, and how that made you think in terms of the educational outreach that was developed around the film.
We were a small but very dynamic team, and we were equally a small family too. So it was, creative decisions were generally the product of discussion. We would all go out in different directions in the day, and would come back and inevitably sit around the fire and share ideas and develop. And you know, it took at least a year or two before we really understood our subjects. There was a huge amount of research being done, both on the ground and on paper. And it was a very organic process, and we've all worked together for so long that it was pretty easy, and we all had a very similar vision. And the product was one which was, the subjects were ones which were so inspiring. I think, you know, what we realized in the making of the film was equally that we were telling a timeless story, as Mark said, but as much as timeless one, a universal one, something that would really could potentially appeal to everybody, from a 3-4-year-old child who's just learning to speak or to read, all the way through to a brazen elder. And that has been one of the huge pleasures with the outreach program. And it's been a huge amount of work, and at times we really questioned what we were doing and whether we were doing it right. But you know, just recently we've been having the pleasure of showing the film, and as you know, we've translated it both into Kiswahili and into Ma, and that was a huge process in itself, because it is such a poetic story, and conveying that poetry and the intimacy of the characters in a language. We all speak Swahili, but Ma was a totally new product. But we got that done, and then with the showing it to Swahili to Swahili speakers and to Ma speakers, it has been such an affirmation that the film can and will speak to people of all ages, way beyond our lifetime. And I think that for me is probably the most wonderful thing that we've achieved.
I think it's maybe worth saying that this we had to raise the money for the film and the outreach outside the film industry, because we couldn't, we knew that looking inside it, the industry, we wouldn't necessarily find enough time or support to give the freedom to the vision that we had. And you know, to any filmmakers listening, if you have a burning vision for a film, or for a film and an outreach campaign, or just an outreach campaign, or anything, however big or small, what I feel we all learned through this, and through times where we felt desperately vulnerable and isolated, is if you hang on to those dreams and you keep working at it, and you have enough of it, somehow like a snowball, and those people who want to be involved join it, and eventually you suddenly get the lift that you need from somebody who says, this is so worthwhile, I'm going to put the money behind it. And you know, that's, we arrived back in the UK to edit the film with no money left in the budget whatsoever. And so we started editing it here with the wonderful Dave Dickey. And we had to work at the same time to raise the rest of the money. And it came because we'd done enough of the groundwork. And so it's really just a message to everybody to say, it doesn't matter, you know, how big or small it is, it's just worth hanging on in those times. It was difficult. It was really, really hard. I mean, we didn't sell the film till it was totally finished, and it was invited to Toronto International Film Festival. So we were vulnerable to each other. A core of us did not take any money from the film until we sold it. And we had all the investors. So it was an enormous, it was a big thing to take on both the film and the outreach. But, you know, it found its home and it found its moment.
Yes, I mean, we've been making films for over 30 years. And this film and the way it was financed at various stages, each time having to go out, felt as precarious as making our very first film.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think of you as champions. I really do, because of that tenacity. I mean, that takes a belief in what you're doing, an extraordinary belief in what you're doing, and just hanging in there through those precarious times, knowing that you have something that's really important to share. And
you don't really know if it's important or not, and you don't really know if it's going to be any good. But if you have a burning desire to share this thing, and I think it's when you have that, then you just have to go on and find a way to do it which retains your own vision. Because you know, so we have diversity in our industry. I think it's so important. But anyway, on to the web.
Let me just ask one question while we're on this, because the distribution is interesting. I mean, that you are working outside of the broadcast world in order to give yourselves more time to capture the footage and make the film that you really have a vision for. And so you ended up selling this film to Apple Plus TV, right? And Apple TV Plus, and that's a very new platform, a very, very new platform. So why did you go with that? You know, why did you go with Apple, and what are the advantages of a platform like that?
Yeah, well, The Elephant Queen was Apple's first film that they released. So the reason we went with them was partly because it was that what they were looking for was a mixture of a theatrical release followed by a long life on a platform. And that is like the perfect combination. Because we made the film to be seen on a huge screen with top quality sound and picture, but also to be able to be seen wherever you might do, you know, on whatever gadget you might have. But so we could combine, being with Apple, we could combine those two. But it was also, I think what was more fundamentally important was that when they approached us at Toronto, they embraced our vision for both the film reaching the widest possible global audience and the importance of making a difference for elephants and conservation on the ground. And it was the confidence that those two things were going to be embraced together, that it was like, wow, this timing is just extraordinary, because you know they were out there looking for what films to launch their platform with, we were out there at the end of a 10-year period. I mean, the fact that we both were doing those two things in the same year was amazing. And although we had other offers and we had other, they just seemed like the perfect fit. And you know that they absolutely did that to the end. For example, in 2019, for every click on the film, every view of the film, they donated money to conservation. And under our request to conservation, actually on the ground in Kenya, a lot of it through Save the Elephants, right where we were making the film in that Tsavo ecosystem. So just as well as the actual the educational content, we made sure that and Apple supported the idea that financially supporting activities through Conservation International and through Save the Elephants would happen, and it did happen, and it happened, I think, to the highest level that they had hoped it would happen. So
Yeah,
which is
congratulations.
fantastic.
It's a new world. I mean, the streaming platforms, and to have that kind of cooperation.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that comes down to the filmmakers driving it. I think all of us, and this, you know, Jackson Wild and Jackson, which was Jackson Hole, is where, certainly for me, it is the festival that inspired the idea of we have to make a difference with our films. And I just saw that bubble grow over the years through Jackson Wild. Mm-hmm. And it is why it is, I would say it's a huge amount of why we did what we did, and which is great. But it's us filmmakers, we actually have to go out of way beyond our comfort zone to do it, and you know, and put time into it.
Yeah, it's a big commitment. It really is. So let's see what, I mean, you have a lot of different aspects to this campaign. If you can talk a little bit, why Kenya, why you created the different elements that you did, and take us through the website, that would be great.
Yeah, so the COVID did mess up things a little bit this year, because we had a wonderful presidential premiere planned, and it had to be pulled a week before it was happening. It was 800 VIPs celebrating the film in Nairobi with the First Lady, and big press coverage. A week before it happened, it was off. So that was very difficult. But we had Apple had agreed that we could do a single national broadcast on the biggest television station in Kenya on Easter Sunday as a sort of national moment. And so we went ahead with that, and that was wonderful. But it was trending on, what was it doing? Twitter, and but anyway, it was very, very popular. Yeah, sorry. So we did that, and then we had planned to launch the outreach on the back of both the presidential and the national plan. And then, so I'll take you into what the website that was launched alongside the citizen screening. So the elephant, it's elephant.co.ke, and it is only accessible in Kenya, and I'll just take you through it. It's designed primarily to be used on a phone, because that's how most people in East Africa would be accessing it. But I'll just show it to you here. This is the front page, and I'll just take you through the 4 sections. There's one which is Discover Elephants, there's the teaching resources, the film itself, and then the elephant crisis. And I'll take you into each section a little bit, just to give you a sense of the scope of it. If we go into Discover Elephants, we've got a whole selection. You remember I said about the workshop that we ran in 2017, asking people who were in wildlife conservation education, what would be the most valuable tools? One of them said, or no, not one of them, many of them said, short pieces which give you information, entertaining information about elephants, things that we can use both in the classroom and outside of it. So here, for example, in this area, there's lots of them, and they're on all different things, from social networking, just like us, An Elephant Never Forgets, and you click on one, and then you choose your language. And so you might say choose Swahili, and there you'll go in Swahili, I hope.
Mguu mkubwa. Unyayo wa mguu wa ndovu ni mkubwa kama sahani ya chakula.
So that gives you an idea. And so those are the videos. Then we did a whole series of interviews with elephant experts working in Kenya. So what I think is wonderful here is that there are, and we've got 2 more Kenyans to add, but there are more Kenyans than there are what we call in East Africa Mzungus. We've got Dr. Ian Douglas Hamilton, who is the grandfather of elephant research in Kenya. And but it's mainly got Kenyans who live, work alongside elephants in conservation. And what we wanted this to be was a resource for young people to say, okay, I'm interested in wildlife, but how do you work in wildlife? Who does what? So it was a way of people dipping in to really to find role models. So that's that section.
Very inspiring. Yeah.
Great. Then in Listen, Mark had written a series of blogs when we were in the field, which dealt with issues from conservation issues through to reflections on elephants or
to poaching, to everything.
And so with Wounded Buffalo in Bristol, we recorded them and then set them in binaural sound to mix them with wildlife sounds. And created sort of more like a podcasts. So these are all of those available to everybody in Kenya to listen to. It's really, some of it's about making the film, some of it's about wildlife issues. It's all sorts of different topics. Then there's the section which is again really for teachers or wildlife educators on just fun facts, making it lighthearted, making it accessible to all sorts of different people. And all of it is downloadable, free of charge. Then in the teaching resources, we developed this series of 28 books. Some of them are for young readers. The idea behind the books was that the curriculum is full. The teachers can't teach anymore, but everybody's got to learn to read. So why not learn to read on stories from the wild, where although we have fun with the characters, they are essentially doing what a dung beetle here would do. And so the idea is that these characters become your friend, when you're young, and even if you live in the middle of Nairobi, you are somehow connected to or understand a little bit more how the natural world works. So there's one section for younger readers, and they're all designed with we had them specially written, and then we involved a educational consultant who would actually implement the reading scheme so that the right words were used, so that it fits in with the Jolly Phonics reading scheme, which is what is used in Kenya. And we developed them alongside Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, so that they would go into schools and become part of how children learn to read. Then we commissioned 3 plays, one for very young kids. I'll just show you a moment of this, where this is a pilot, we filmed the pilot when the director was just sort of testing it out for the first time at Kibokoni School. So that just gives you an idea. So there are 3 plays. That's the one for the youngest kids. The one for the older children, or the young adults, is set in a courtroom where an elephant's on trial for murder, and it really looks at human-wildlife conflict and challenges conceptions of beliefs about elephants. Then these video activity books, they are for schools or wildlife clubs to use alongside the videos, the short videos that I showed you earlier. And they would allow, they give activities, they basically expand on, they allow you to use the videos as a starting point and then expand on activities and information around them.
That's a great range of different approaches and different uses that are really completely integrated into the curriculum.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned at one point that a large percentage of Kenyans are under the age of 15, I think you said.
Yes, that's right. And I mean, Etienne, I don't know if you want to address a little bit about, because Etienne is obviously with his wife Lucy, who's the director of Kibokoni School, completely enmeshed in that education system. Do you have anything that you wanted to add?
Well, no, other than, you know, we're targeting the key demographic. That's a staggering statistic, but it points a very clear picture of what's yet to come. So we have an enormous responsibility to provide the information, to provide the inspiration to that young generation. So it's a responsibility, but equally an incredible opportunity, and it's one that, again, we committed ourselves to contributing to. I think it's a daunting fact, but imagine a forthcoming population who are in fact inspired, who have been converted, who really do appreciate, particularly in Kenya, a very, very unique natural heritage. I think it's it's a bittersweet, but we're looking at it from a positive perspective and looking at it as very much an opportunity to make a difference. And again, with a product which is timeless and which is universal. Recently, we've been working a lot with conservation organizations, and recently, particularly around Amboseli, the impact of COVID on young girls, on young Maasai girls, has been particularly catastrophic. You know, girls, inspired young ladies being pulled out of school and reverting to a recent lifestyle, FGM becoming far more prominent. But we've been hearing how the film has been a huge inspiration to young girls. The matriarch, the female-led story, how it's young girls, young ladies are drawing great strength from it, and that to me is again an affirmation of what we're doing and who we're targeting.
And that, combined with the interviews with experts, many of whom are women, as role models, really
exactly
gives an example of a clear path forward. Yeah.
Yes.
To take you through the rest of the website, on the Elephant Queen film, that gives access to the film in Kiswahili and Ma. It was active after the screening and will be active again, but it's not at the moment. And it basically gives you, if you reviews and press, an overview. It's more the sort of the factual stuff for those who want to know more about the film. And then lastly, there's a section on the elephant crisis, which gives you the opportunity to help if you want to get involved that way. But probably most relevant here is a link that takes you through to all the organizations that are active in Kenya. But these are live links which take you to those websites, so that we wanted to be generous to invite people to join them, explore them, and get involved in the amazing work that's being done by all these groups, and use the film as a kind of catalyst for that. But
that's an extraordinary number of groups, and many of them are very solutions oriented. So in being able to foster a discussion that's solutions oriented, that gets people thinking about how to manage that conflict and what are the opportunities for coexistence.
Creating the website and having everything digitally available is obviously one solution, but that does not reach everybody in Kenya. And either because they don't have access to the internet, it's too expensive, they don't have the right equipment, they don't have power, whatever it is. So to address that, because that actually it's the people who live in these remote areas alongside the national parks or alongside where elephants and other wildlife exist, who are actually, it's incredibly important to work with those people to inspire to share the film there. We launched with Save the Elephants and the Bestseller Foundation the Elephant Queen mobile cinema. Well, I probably shouldn't say launched actually, because again, it was supposed to be launched next month in October, but we've had to postpone it because of COVID. But what that will be doing is taking the film and the educational resources to remote communities right across Kenya. And the reason that Save the Elephants is involved with it is that they were excited and wanted to have the film as a way of opening the conversation with different communities. Because if they just go in as Save the Elephants, where do you begin the conversation? Whereas if you take a film that essentially you might say, oh, all it does is make you fall in love with an elephant. But actually, if you say, well, that's a great starting point, now let's do the work to turn that into action. So you show the film in these local communities. We're going to go into schools initially on the first day. Then we hope that the kids will talk at home about it. And then the next day we'll do a community screening and activities in the schools. And we will have with us Save the Elephants, who will then, having hopefully opened up the conversation, will follow up and continue to do the work that they feel is important in the protection of wildlife and inspiring communities to take on board conservation and ways of living more peacefully alongside animals. So we'll be launching that. Etienne has just secured a vast truck which will be outfitted to take the mobile cinema team around the country. Yeah, so that's our solution, our non-digital solution, which is, we didn't think we would do that, but it turned out that we realized there was a huge need, and that it was also actually the most fun way of showing the film, because sharing a film with a huge group of people and everybody getting excited about it and chatting about it is actually really good fun.
The other great thing about partnering with Save the Elephants is that they have the ability to monitor the effect of the film. So they'll be going into rural communities to begin with questionnaires and that. They'll then see the film, they'll be exposed to the education materials and that. So hopefully in 2 years' time, we'll have some figures to actually assess how the impact campaign is working in those communities.
That's perfect, because I was just about to ask you that, because that is a question a lot of people are curious about, is how do you measure impact, and how do you know if you're having long-lasting impact, and what does that look like? What is impact really? And and how does that evolve over time? And the fact that you're able to measure it is very useful, and I hope you'll be able to share those results at a Jackson Wild in the future. And the mobile cinema, there's several films I'm aware of that are, once COVID allows this to happen again, that are looking at that model. And in order to be able to have impact right at the front lines, or where the communities that are most affected are, and that's a new model too, that it's not just watching the films back in what developed countries, it's really engaging and having impact in the country with people who are most affected. We're going to run out of time here. I kept this one so fast. Any last thoughts from you?
It's been a great conversation. I feel we've...
I was afraid of this, that it would go so fast. I really, Etienne, do you have a last thought?
The opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, it's been lovely to chat about it. I think the last thing I would add is just, which we've touched on already, but it's just the importance of partnerships. And we showed you the variety of conservation partners with whom we're working. And again, it's I would encourage that at every level for anyone doing it. It's not only is it a wonderful guide, but it's a huge magnifier of impact. You know, you're working with people who often know more than you do about what it is you're trying to achieve. And we've been so fortunate to have so many people and so many organizations who feel similarly to us, but equally people and groups who are what they have the inspiration, they have the passion, but what they're lacking is the resources, the actual educational content. And that is, we realize that is what we can offer. And as filmmakers, I think it's not just what we can offer, it's what we must offer. Everyone believes in their film, but it has to be a belief that goes beyond simply making it. It has to be something which really works closely with the people who are on the ground, and targets the ones who really need it. So yes, it's a partnership, and it's been a great joy to work with so many wonderful people.
We had an amazing partnership with Paula Kahumbu and Wildlife Direct, who have been, I mean, Paula's energy never runs out, and
Wow, right?
Exactly. And what's been amazing with Paula is that she is helping us, and she will take the film and get it into areas of society that we can't reach. And she has embraced it completely. We worked with her during the filming of it, and very much during the Kenyan national broadcast, and we will be with the mobile cinema.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you all. It's so inspiring, the film itself and this amazing impact campaign that you've put together. And I look forward to hearing more about it and more about the mobile cinema tour and the results that you have in 2 years' time. So let's keep the conversation going. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.